Well, hi, and welcome to Celebration Bar Review's discussion of the Texas Bar Exam. My name is Jackson Mumey. I own the company, and I've been teaching Texas Bar for over 20 years now. So I'm excited to talk to you about this test and how our preparation works specifically. There are some other lectures on our website where you can find out more about our other courses, but let's jump right into the Texas exam. And if you're familiar with the test already, obviously some of this will be in the part of a review, but if you're not familiar with the rules and requirements, I want to just briefly go through those, and that will give me the opportunity to talk a little bit about how our course works to prepare you for this particular examination. Now, the Board of Texas Law Examiners are actually pretty cooperative and helpful. They supply all applicants with a booklet of information about the rules and the requirements, and you can access and download that from the Texas Board of Law Examiners website. It's an awkward one. I'm not even going to try and give it to you here. Just Google for Texas Bar of Law Examiners, Texas BLE. It'll take you into the main menu, and you'll see the rules book, which you can download or look at. And it's a useful document to have because there are a fair number of rules and intricacies to them, and I'm obviously just going to touch on the highlights. Now, there's some general eligibility requirements to be admitted to the Texas Bar. You have to complete a law study requirement that I'll talk more about in a moment, and you need to be either a United States citizen or a lawfully admitted alien, either for temporary or permanent residence. You have to satisfactorily complete the Texas Bar Exam, which is why we're here. That's the full test. And that includes the multi-state and the Texas portions, as well as completing the multi-state professional responsibility exam, or as it's called, the MPRE. That's a separate exam that's given 3 times a year, August, November, and March. You can sit for it anywhere in the country. You don't have to take it in Texas. The MPRE, I'm just going to get out of the way right now. It's a 2-hour, 60-question exam. 10 of those questions are not scored. They're used for evaluation purposes, but you don't know which 10 those are. At any rate, your score will be the number you get correct out of the 50 questions that actually count. We have an MPRE preparation that you can include within your Texas Bar Review course. The test itself is not a particularly difficult one or a big deal. It's a compliance exam, but something that has to be done. Let me turn next to the law study requirement. Under the Texas rules, you need to graduate from an ABA-approved law school with a Juris Doctorate degree or its equivalent. An LLM, if you're a foreign-trained attorney, will not satisfy that. Now, this is the primary rule or requirement. There are exceptions for attorneys from other states as well as foreign-trained attorneys, and there are some exceptions for individuals that went to non-ABA accredited law schools that are not correspondence or online-based schools, and we'll come to that in a moment. There are also some obvious requirements about character and fitness. You do have to go through a character and fitness check in Texas as part of the process. And since we're talking about character and fitness, and I mentioned the MPRE, let me just say that to pass the MPRE part of the test, you have to get a scaled score of 85, which translates to about 35 questions correct out of the 50 that are graded, and that score is valid for a period of 5 years while you're completing the other parts of your Texas requirements and passing the other parts of the exam. So you do the ethics test, you have your character and fitness check. If you're a Texas law student, you have to make something called a declaration of intent to study law. You file that with the Texas examiners you did when you began law school. Most of our students are either graduates of law school now or practitioners in other jurisdictions, so I'm not going to talk much about that declaration. But if you're in a situation where you're still in law school, make sure that you get that filed, talk to your law school dean and people that work with you on that. If you're going to law school somewhere other than Texas, it doesn't apply to you either. Now, with respect to the application to take the bar exam, there are a few deadlines that you need to be aware of. The test is given twice a year in February and July. For the February exam, the examiners require your forms and fees be received between June 30th and August 30th of the preceding year. That's a long way in advance. If you plan to sit for the July exam, you had to submit your forms and fees between November 30th and January 30th. So all of that information, again, is online, and you will do most of the application process online these days. There are also some late filing opportunities for what's called good cause or to prevent hardship. Those are pretty broad terms, and that gives the examiners a great deal of discretion. But in those two situations, you can file after the deadlines. It's something to keep in mind and be aware of those dates. Typically, for the February exam, you would get up until October 30th to file, and for the July exam, you would get up until March 30th to file. But there is an additional fee involved, and you have to submit showing of good cause or to prevent hardship, and then the board has to make a decision. So if you can avoid late filing, you should attempt to do so. Now, once you've filed your form for character and fitness and you've paid your fees, actually, let me stop and just tell you what the fee requirements are. They are detailed in that rule book I talked about, but currently, as I'm speaking, if you're an out-of-state law student taking the bar exam for the first time, your fees are going to be anywhere from $320 to $445, depending on your school status, whether you're in state or out of state. It's always a good idea to double check, but as of this recording date, those are the fees. If you're an attorney who's licensed in another state and you're taking the Texas bar, your fees jump to $1,040, and these fees will always include the application as well as any investigation for character and fitness. If you're a foreign trained attorney in a foreign nation, your fees are $1,140. And then if you choose to use a laptop on the exam, which we would strongly recommend, I would say about 80% or so of the bar takers now are using laptops. There's a $50 fee plus some miscellaneous fees that you want to be aware of. So those all have to be paid initially. You file your forms, you pay your fees. So now what happens? What's the exam all about? Well, in Texas, the bar exam is a 2.5-day test, and it consists of several components, so let's just walk through them in the order that they happen. The first day of the test is the last Tuesday, or it's the Tuesday before the last Wednesday of February or July, and it's a morning-only test on Tuesday. Exact dates obviously are provided by the bar examiners. You can get them from their website. But in any event, on the Tuesday morning section, there are going to be two segments of the exam that will be given to you. The first is called the Multistate Performance Test, or MPT. This is a test written by the National Council or National Conference of Bar Examiners. It's a generic test and then administered in Texas. The performance test is a 90-minute exam in which you'll be given a package of information. Typically it's about 15 to 20 pages long. And in this package of information you'll have a file which will have some transcripts or testimony, client notes, memoranda, something of that nature, some kind of fact pattern. And then you'll have in the package what's called a library. And in the library, you'll have case law and statutory materials from a fictional jurisdiction. And you're going to be asked to do some sort of a lawyer-like task in a 90-minute time period. Now, the kind of tasks that might be included could be anything from preparing a closing argument to a jury or drafting a memo to a partner in preparation for litigation. It could be writing a client letter or putting together a prenup agreement for your client or their spouse or spouse-to-be. It could be drafting a brief to the court, something that's persuasive. The point is that the range of tasks will be designed to see how well you can combine a variety of skills in a short period of time and to produce a lawyer-like, real-life writing piece. Now, you don't need to know any law outside of what's given to you inside this multi-state package. It should be everything that you need contained within the materials. If you go back to your law school days, short or long time ago, I would say that the performance test is a little bit like a law review journal write-on package in which you've been given the material and your job was to assemble it and put it together, or assembling a moot court package, something of that nature. Now, as I said, the multi-state bar examiners write these questions, so they're not Texas specific. They're given around the country. We're licensed to provide those questions to you along with point sheets and answer explanations. We do that within our course. We have several of these exams assigned to you, as well as workshops in which I go over them. And then if you've chosen our mentored course, you'll actually be sending me in your performance tests so that we can walk through them and get a sense of how you're doing. Even in our basic mentored course, where I'm not reading your work specifically, we are going to show you how to set up a performance test, how to write it, and then we'll provide you with point sheets and model and sample answers to give you a base of reference. Now, obviously, it's difficult to study for a performance test. The best way to do that is to practice and prepare under time circumstances, and we'll show you everything that you need to know for that part of the test. Is it really what a lawyer does in practice? Well, given that it's only 90 minutes, probably not, but it's a reasonable facsimile, we'll put it that way. Now, the performance test, as I said, is 90 minutes. It's worth 10% of your overall score on the bar exam, so not a huge amount, but 10% still is something to be considered, and we want to make sure that you get the most out of that you can. Now, in addition, on Tuesday morning, you will also have something called the P&E, which stands for Procedure and Evidence, short answer questions. This is a 90-minute short form test in which you're asked questions that deal specifically with the areas of Texas procedure and evidence. Here we're talking about civil procedure, jurisdiction, pleading and practice, criminal procedure, and evidence, civil and criminal evidence. Again, almost all under the Texas rules. There was a time when federal rules were tested, but as I'll come to in a moment, that's really not part of the Texas P&E any longer. So these are the short form kinds of questions. They're short answer, fill in the blank types of questions, 90-minute exam. This is also worth 10% of your grade. And in our course, we'll take you through all of the subjects on P&E. We'll also give you practice questions. And in taking you through the subjects, we'll give you written materials as well as lectures. So you'll be completely ready for that part of the exam. So that's your Tuesday morning. On Tuesday afternoon, you get to go home and rest, which I think is great. It's a 2.5-day test, kind of odd, but you get Tuesday afternoon, relax a little bit, maybe have a good dinner and get a good night's sleep. On Wednesday, you come back in and you take the Multistate Bar Exam, or the MBE. Now, we cover the MBE fully, and we have an introductory lecture on our website. I encourage you to watch that. It's got plenty of information. I'm not going to repeat all of that here. I just want to tell you that the MBE is a 200-question multiple choice test. 100 questions will be given in the morning, 100 questions will be given in the afternoon. This exam is also written by the National Conference of Bar Examiners, and again, we have a license from the examiners to provide you with actual past exam sample questions, and we've developed answer explanations for each choice. There are over 1,900 questions in our course, including more than 4 full-length exams from the Multistate Bar Examiners, so you're fully able to prepare for that. For each of those subjects, we've provided written outlines of the law, comprehensive lectures, and then these practice questions. We also have all of the recently released online practice exams. They're all licensed as well, and that's included in our material. So anything that's out there, we've got it if it's legit. As I said, the course will include lectures and written materials for each of those subjects. So let me talk about the subjects on the test. Beginning in 2015, the multi-state exam has changed, and there are now 7 subjects tested. Those 7 subjects are federal constitutional law, contracts, which includes Article 2 of the UCC, criminal law and procedure, which is considered one topic, the federal rules of evidence, real property, torts, and then the new 7th subject is federal civil procedure, which includes federal jurisdiction. And that's why you won't see Fed, Civ Pro, and jurisdiction as part of the Texas P&E any longer. They're actually being tested on the multi-state now. Now, the questions on the exam will be divided equally or roughly equally. I think it's about 27 or 28 questions per subject between these 7 subjects. And our materials reflect the changes as provided by the National Conference in their outline of the subjects in the material. So we're fully prepared for civil procedure and jurisdiction as well. We take you through all that material in great depth so that you're able to work with those questions. Some multi-state questions are relatively simple, some are relatively difficult, but the vast majority of questions I think are pretty straightforward, and you'll find that through our course with practice and repetition, you should be able to handle those questions pretty satisfactorily. Now, the multi-state bar, MBE, will be worth 40% of your overall score. So obviously that's a big part of the exam. So just to recap, your MPT is 10%, procedure and evidence is 10%, the MBE is worth 40%, so that's going to mean the remaining 40% will come from the Texas essays. The multi-state exam is a full day's worth of work, all day Wednesday, and it's a busy day, and should be a good day for you. Well, on Thursday you come back for the final day of the exam, and it's tough to do this at the end. It's the Texas essay questions. It's a long day. As you've figured out, and I've already said, the essay questions are worth the remaining 40% of your overall score. And the way that this is done is that you're going to be given 30-minute essay questions in groups of 2. They're grouped by broad categories, so you'll actually have 6 groups of 2 questions, so a total of 12 essays. The topics sometimes are repeated, but in general you'll get a single question on each topic, or 2 questions on the same topic in that grouping. There are 6 questions in the morning and 6 questions in the afternoon. Now, the subjects that are testable in the essay format are Texas real property, which includes Texas oil and gas, although thankfully there's usually only 1 question in oil and gas, but it's combined with the real property question when it's given. Then there's the Uniform Commercial Code, and unlike the rest of the country, Articles 3 and 4 are still being tested in Texas. That's not so everywhere else, but it is here. So 1 question is typically Article 3 and 4. And then Article 9 is the second question. If you're not familiar with those article numbers, Article 3 is negotiable instruments, Article 4 is bank deposits, and just a little bit. It's not really the actual bank clearinghouse, it's just as it relates to Article 3, really. Article 9 is secure transactions. Then the third session or section would be called business associations. This could include questions on corporations, partnerships, agency, limited liability companies, and professional associations. The next grouping of questions will come in the area of family law, which would include the topics of community property, almost always on the exam, trusts, guardianships. So typically what we see in family law would be a domestic relations question and a community property question. Then we have the next category. I misspoke there. Trusts and guardianships is your next category. And in this area, you're going to get a trust question or 2. Sometimes there's a guardianship question and a trust question. You also have the area of wills and administration of estates. And so again, wills questions or 2 wills questions or wills and an estates question. And then you have consumer rights, which includes insurance and deceptive trade practices. So those are your broad topic areas. Certain topics are considered crossover topics and might be included as a minor element in a question. For example, a tax problem might show up in a family law or oil and gas question, or a bankruptcy problem might show up in a wills or a property question. They are testable only to the extent that they provide context. The actual tax code and bankruptcy codes are not testable. So we'll provide you a little bit of information, but it's really minimal to the amount that you need to know for those 2 topics. All of the other major subjects we cover in depth in our course, again with outlines, lectures, and sample questions and practice questions. Plenty of opportunity to practice questions, write essays, learn the subject, and then if you're in the mentored course, you'd be sending that work in, typically talking with me about your work so that you're getting direct feedback on the writing that you're doing. And I think that that's a major advantage in taking this particular test. 30-minute essays require a particular writing style. We'll show you that style. We'll develop for you a way to write that we think is successful. We know over the years, over the 20-some years we've been doing this, where we've exceeded the Texas pass rates substantially, that this writing style works quite well. So we'll show that to you in the lectures. We'll also do workshops. We will have drafted our own model answers, and we will produce sample answers that come from a variety of sources to help you see what these questions and answers look like. So lots of opportunities and options there. Now, as to the subjects that are actually tested, I would say that most of them are relatively straightforward. A few are, like oil and gas, probably more complicated, but it is a manageable part of the test. Again, you'll take 6 essay questions in the morning on Thursday, have a lunch break, and then take 6 questions in the afternoon. Now, these scores are all put together, essays and MPT and multi-state bar exam and P&E, and using something called the equi-percentile method, which I won't go into detail here, your raw score will be converted into a scaled multi-state score of 0 to 200. For our purposes, what you really need to know right now is that all of these scores from all the sources are put into the scaled score, and then Texas converts that 200 points into a possible 1,000 Texas points because they got to Texas supersize it. So to translate that, it means there are 400 Texas points available from the MBE, 400 Texas points available from the essays, 100 Texas points from the performance test, and 100 Texas points from procedure and evidence. Put all those together, add them up, you need a total of 675 Texas points out of a possible 1,000 to pass the exam. The good news is it doesn't really matter where those 675 points come, so a higher score in one area can offset a lower score in another. I would say that in general what you want to be able to do is to get functionally somewhere around 135, 140 points on the MBE. That's a pretty good base. And then that translates to Texas points, which is double that number. So that's the number you're looking for. And in order to get that 130 points, you need about 120 correct answers on the multi-state exam. Well, got to get your 675. If you do that, you pass. If you don't, you fail. And if you fail, you can take the exam up to 5 times, but no more than that unless good cause is shown. I can't tell you what good cause means. I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but I would not count on being able to take the exam if you failed 5 times. So once you've taken this exam more than once, there are some special rules about being able to review from prior exams. I do a lot of work with bar takers who failed this exam previously, and we have gotten lots and lots of people through this exam when they came to us on try 3 or 4 or 5. So it's certainly manageable and doable. Our belief and our experience has been that if you were smart enough to get into law school, although that's a questionable premise these days, but if you were smart enough to get into law school and smart enough to graduate law school, you should be able to pass the Texas bar. What we'll do in our course is to focus primarily on your writing and your multi-state work. We'll try and give you enough feedback to write for this specific audience on the Texas exam, and make sure that you're spending your time where it's actually going to bear a benefit to you by focusing on the trends on the exam, the subject matters, and the information in the exam that we think is significant, and not be distracted by the marginal things that could come up and be problematic if you got too absorbed in them. Well, what if you're already a licensed attorney in another jurisdiction? You do have a couple of options available to you. First is that you, if you have to take the exam, you're going to sit for the full exam, the same as anyone else. There used to be something called the Texas short form for attorneys. It doesn't exist anymore. So if you have to take the exam, you got to take all 2.5 days. However, you could be eligible for admission without an exam at all if you meet all the requirements, citizenship, moral character, and you've been actively and substantially engaged in the practice of law in your own state as your principal business or occupation for at least 5 of the last 7 years before you file your application in Texas. There's also a requirement for this waive-in that you have not failed the Texas bar exam previously and that you have a JD from an approved U.S. law school. And there's a lot of detail and specifics about that. If if you're practicing in another state, just look at the rule book, talk to the bar examiners, and it may be such that you don't have to take the bar at all. But if you do, then obviously you want to be aware that you're going to have to pay all the fees and take the full exam as I've described it. If you happen to have a JD from an unapproved law school and you've been practicing law in another state, there are special rules for you, so make sure that you check those out and talk to the bar examiners. I'm not going to go through the detail here. What about if you're a foreign trained attorney? Well, if you have a valid law license from a foreign nation, you also have separate requirements for the exam. In brief, you need to have been actively engaged as a lawyer in your home nation for 5 of the last 7 years. be licensed in your country, have the equivalent of an American Juris Doctorate degree, and prove that it's sufficiently comparable if the examiners are not familiar with your school or your country's law practice. An LLM from an approved U.S. law school helps, but it is not by itself enough to get you into the exam. Again, specific requirements, look them up. We do have information on our site for foreign attorneys where we go into more detail. And I will tell you that over the years I've worked with a lot of foreign national attorneys taking the Texas bar with a great deal of success. So it's perfectly manageable. You're going to need a little more time typically to study and get ready. And you've got to go through the application process, which is a more complicated process. So start that process really early. Now, in terms of talking about studying for the exam for everyone, our normal student taking the exam will need 250 to 300 hours of study time to prepare. Most of the people I work with are studying part-time for the exam while they work or take care of their families or maybe even finish up their schoolwork, which means about a 4 to 6 month window to study is optimum. We have a few people that study full-time for the exam. That could be done probably in as little as 6 to 8 weeks, but either way you're going to put in about 250 to 300 hours of study. There are a lot of different subjects and components, and so for that reason alone, I think it's a good idea to start early. We'll provide you with a study guide, which is a list of assignments that you follow through the course, along with how long each assignment should take you. So it's very directed study, and you won't be wandering around on your own. My experience has been that if you follow the study guide we created for you and you do the work, you shouldn't have a problem passing this bar exam. It's not one of the easier bars in the country, but I do think it's a fair test, and it's one that with the requisite amount of study and assistance from us and doing enough practice, you should be able to pass and expect to pass. And certainly we look forward to having the opportunity to work with you. But I know that in this brief video I haven't covered everything. So if you've got additional questions, feel free to check out our website, or you can call me directly, and my direct phone number is 864-365-6083. I'll answer the phone myself, and I look forward to speaking with you and answering any questions. But moreover, I really hope we have the opportunity to work together and to be able to celebrate your passing Texas bar exam results when that time comes as well. Thanks very much for watching, and good luck on the exam.